After only 2 episodes of watching Blue Lock, I was convinced I wouldn't like it. There's a lot of anime out there that I don't like, and at the top of that list is overdramatic sports anime that don't understand the sport they're adapting. But I don't think Blue Lock is a sports anime first. We'll get to that in a second. And while there were many parts of Blue Lock I'm still critical of today, I actually think it's a really good show. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about when being entertaining is enough. It's not uncommon for me and other people reviewing art to hold it to a pompous standard. We always talk about the shows that make us feel big emotions. And while I do think it's essential for art to evoke emotion, it's easy to focus on the big things and ignore what many people would point to as the most important part of a show, entertainment, which is where Blue Lock comes in, because while it's far from perfect, it's overwhelmingly entertaining. Often shows are forced to compromise between different priorities, and Blue Lock is no exception, but its oversimplification of soccer, sometimes single-note characters, and very contrived circumstance all contribute heavily towards creating an incredibly fun story. It's melodramatic, takes itself too seriously, and at times hyper unrealistic. And while this would normally hurt a show, I think in Blue Lock's case, this allows them the opportunity to be more creative in the way they make the show fun. Because I think Blue Lock has a very mature self-awareness that doesn't come in the usual tone of satire or self-deprecation. It embraces what it's doing with no shame. We live in an era where so many shows are trying to be self-referential. Satires become so popular, resulting in this sarcastic self-awareness where shows never really end up putting themselves out there. It almost feels like they're making fun of people for trying too hard. And while there's a lot of great shows that I adore that sit in that place, and I'm not here to shit on satire, it's really refreshing to see a show that, from my perspective, in a lot of ways is very stupid, embrace what it is and prioritize what it wants to do most, which is make it fun. And that's where my original point ends up coming full circle. Because despite the flaws, or maybe because of them, Blue Lock is really fun. The show primarily follows Yoichi Isagi, a football striker who's the star of his high school team. We jump in a high-stakes last game of the season that'll determine whether or not his team continues to compete. And when given an opportunity to make the game-tying goal, he chooses to make an extra pass, giving his teammate an easier shot than him. But of course his teammate misses. This isn't a show about friendship winning over everything else. This gives the other team's star striker an opportunity to make the game-winning goal, which of course he does, because this show primarily focuses on ego, and it explores it through the namesake of the show, Blue Lock. Essentially a football battle royale where instead of fighting for their lives, they're fighting for an opportunity to play for the national team. However, choosing to participate in Blue Lock means that if you lose and aren't the sole winner, you waive any right to compete for the national team at any point in the future. And while this very contrived premise allows for a lot of fun, there's a lot of parts that don't make sense if you think about them too closely. Each of the students is given very little information, also what parents would ever agree to this, their reasoning for how this competition is even happening, or how they got the funding for it, or why the national team is supporting this is very shaky. However, I have watched a lot of anime with even more contrived premises that make even less sense, so this obviously isn't a deal breaker. This also introduces the main premise of Blue Lock as a competition and the show as a whole, which is to be a world-class striker, you have to have a degree of ego. Another on-the-nose and slightly annoying point is that the main person running the competition is named Ego. But this is the first of 3 shockingly insightful ideas presented by Blue Lock across the first season. I do believe some degree of unreasonable ego is necessary to be the best at something that is highly competitive. However, the start of the competition comes with a common trope that I've seen too often across sports anime that's very frustrating. I call it the video gamification of sports. At times it feels like someone was given as much information as they possibly could want about the sport, but they were never allowed to actually play it. It results in this weird, almost uncanny valley where some of the aspects of the sport they know too much about and other very obvious things are ignored. Each striker in Blue Lock is given one skill that they're really good at. Isagi can read the field, Bachira can dribble like Steph Curry, and Chiguri's really fast. And then this show is a sports shonen, so central to its story is rapid improvement from all the characters. But in this case, what that means is Bachira just gets even better at dribbling when he was already really good at dribbling. And part of the reason this is really frustrating for me is in many ways they're so obviously missing the complexity of the thing they're talking about. The main topic of the show, football. especially given the fact that most people talking about the show seem not to care at all. It makes me feel crazy. It seems remarkably convenient that none of the characters' skills seem to match up with one another. And when each character's special power is already starting at such a high level, there's not much room for improvement. So they come up with very convoluted explanations for how they can be better. It's probably very obvious that I have lots of criticisms for this show, and probably a lot of you don't have these same issues. But to come back to my initial point, the reason I'm making this video is because I actually really enjoy this show. There were so many indicators in the first couple episodes that made me think I wouldn't like it. But what it comes down to is, for me, the parts that were good make everything else that didn't work worth it. For example, multiple times in the show, they make decisions that I think are really fun and I didn't see coming. Because if you look at this show not as a sports anime first, but as a battle royale show, it's really well done and very interesting. Tournament arcs have been praised across many different forms of anime as being a very interesting setting for your characters to explore the world, while also introducing a large ensemble cast around them. But one of the problems with tournament arcs is it's very easy for them to feel repetitive and formulaic, often like you know what's coming next. But this is one of the main things Blue Lock did right. Time and time again, they chose to mix things up and surprise me. There was surprising political decisions from both the players and the runners of Blue Lock that led to a remarkably fun and interesting season 1 of a battle royale show. There's also difficulty in navigating telling a story like a battle royale because inevitably you have to kill off most of your characters. But I like the way Blue Lock did it, where there's still intense stakes that people care about more than anything, but it's not life or death. It allows the audience to engage in the intense political game that is a battle royale with less sad stakes that are built around characters' deaths, which ultimately creates an environment where it's easier for the audience to have fun in an already really engaging and interesting setting. And there's also a couple surprisingly insightful moments talking about things like luck or how challenging environments can force people into rapid growth. But overall, what the show is ultimately about is those hell yeah moments where everything comes together, where the stakes are really high and you're incredibly invested. Because if these moments didn't work as well as they did, I don't think the show would have been as popular as it was. And I definitely wouldn't have enjoyed it. It's kind of the most important catalyst that holds everything together. Because sometimes the most important part of a show is how entertaining it is.